Good morning. Welcome to our 9th Annual Fair and Affordable Housing Summit. Thank you all for being here today. We appreciate your taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. I want to just give you a few pointers, tips on the housing market. 2013, our existing home sales were the highest since 2007. We had 33 consecutive months of increased sales from the same month over month, compared from February 14th to February 13th. February existing home sales outpaced February 2013 and were the second highest February since February 2004. And new home starts are up about 3% and appear to be strengthening. Interest rates in the last year and a half have only gone up from about 3.25% to 4.25%, so still a great time to buy a house or sell a house. It is with great pleasure I'm honored to introduce our very talented and very dedicated Mayor, Alan Joines.
You were looking forward to lunch, all right? My remarks will be very brief, less than 45 minutes, so no. Seriously, I did want to come by, as I do every year, to thank you all for participating in this summit. And I think I saw my colleague Jeff McIntosh someplace right there, council member from the Northwest Ward. Jeff, thank you for your support and being here. Let's give Jeff a hand there for being here. I want to thank all the various sponsors and participants today. You'll hear from a lot of strong folks and talented folks who will talk about the housing market, but more importantly, as we talk about fair housing. This is Fair Housing Month in the city of Winston-Salem, and we as a city government certainly are absolutely committed to that, and I know you all are with your various organizations as we bring light to the issues that come out. Unfortunately, we still have to put light on this subject to make sure that we are treating everyone fairly, equitably, and everybody has an opportunity for safe, decent, affordable housing. That's a key part of any successful city, I believe, is to make sure we do that. So on behalf of the city of Winston-Salem and Mr. McIntosh and the City Council, we welcome you here today and thank you for your participation. Wanda, thank you for your hard work, and the members of the Human Relations Commission for doing this every year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Joines. Thank you. Hi, everybody. As you can see, we're breaking from the agenda just a tad, but anyway, I'm Wanda Allen Abraha. I'm the director of the Human Relations Department with the City of Winston-Salem. Again, welcome to everyone who is here. What I'm going to do is jump ahead of myself just a tad with one portion of the program. We are going to save the general purpose and all of that until after lunch, as it is on your agendas. But we are going to have one part right now that we weren't counting on doing, but we're going to surprise legal aid, and we're going to ask representatives from legal aid to come on up to the podium now as I speak. But what I wanted to do was to introduce to you a new award that we have instituted just this year, and it's called the Breaking Barriers Award. And what this award recognizes is any organization or agency within the city of Winston-Salem or Forsyth County that has really stood out in terms of advocating for fair housing laws, fair housing regulations, and rights. And so Legal Aid has certainly been that organization, and we're delighted to have them to receive our inaugural Breaking Barriers Award. Some of the things that Legal Aid does in the area of fair housing is, number one, of course, they investigate fair housing complaints. They have always worked very cooperatively with our department being the organization that is responsible for being the HUD partner in the city of Winston-Salem's jurisdiction for investigating fair housing complaints. But also, they do their own work independent of anything that we do. And so they now are involved in fair housing testing here in the state of North Carolina. And we will also be having testing, conducted here in Winston-Salem. That will be forthcoming. Of course, we can't announce exactly when it'll be because it would be defeating the purpose, but we will be having it, and we've actually initiated it. We had a pilot testing project that we did a couple of years ago. But anyway, Legal Aid is always there. They're always the people that we can even go to and count on when we're looking for partnership, when we're looking for support in the community. And oftentimes we serve some of the very same individuals in our community. And the staff at Legal Aid is absolutely phenomenal You all know how I feel about you. I think you know that. I think I think the sun rises and sets on you guys. You really are that awesome. And I think that you don't always receive the recognition and the praise that you deserve, because you really do work with people in the community who do not have a voice. They simply do not know where to go. They may not have the means or the wherewithal to file a complaint and to hire an attorney and so on and so forth, but you all are there for them. So I thank you for all the work that you do. And without further ado, Mayor Joines and I would like to present the 2014 inaugural Breaking Barriers Fair Housing Award to Legal Aid of North Carolina's Winston-Salem office.
Let me just say, Wanda has taken away all of my thunder because she said all the wonderful things I was going to say about my staff. Can I have legal aid please stand, the folks that are here? Thank you. We thank you for this award, and the reason why I have two young ladies up here, Ms. Takesha Red and Ms. Liza Barron, they are supervisors in our general practice unit who actually do these cases on a regular, consistent basis. And as you will find out from Takesha's performance today, she is a guru on this fair housing thing. So I wanted to give a shout out to both of them in particular, but our whole staff works together to do the things that we need to do for being the voice for those who are voiceless. And so we thank you for this inaugural award, and we thank you so much.
And on behalf of the Human Relations Commission and Department, we welcome you to our 9th annual Fair and Affordable Housing Summit. I'm delighted to see you all, and we see many of you each and every year, and we appreciate that support. There are two particular sponsors that we have the lead sponsors, actually, I should say, this year, from BB&T and Piedmont Federal. And so I would like to give both BB&T and Piedmont Federal representatives an opportunity to come up to the microphone and make comments. So this time, we will be addressed by those representatives. From Piedmont Federal, we have Ann Holland, who is coming up to make comments.
Thank you all for coming today. Piedmont Federal is very pleased to be a sponsor of the event. We have participated in this event. We were discussing that it has been 9 years. This is the 9th year of this event, and previously we were involved with the housing expos that were held before that. So we are dedicated to the purpose of home ownership, and we home loans are our primary focus, and we certainly have a unique relationship with the lenders and realtors and local government agencies, many of which are represented today. So enjoy your lunch, and I hope that there's a lot of information that you get from today's presentation. Thank you again for attending, and if Piedmont Federal can help any of you in the future, please give us a call.
Thank you, Ann. And we have Mr. Jacoby Harrell representing BB&T.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jacoby Harrell with BB&T. Also, my manager is here, Sandra Braswell. She drove all the way from Durham here, so she's here as well. It's an honor to be a sponsor of this event. See a lot of familiar faces, a lot of faces that I work with on a daily basis. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a community mortgage specialist at BB&T, and BB&T has a focus on the affordable community, and that's my job at BB&T, is to focus on that market and to be the face of BB&T in that market. So our table is located right over here. Any questions, feel free to approach me, and hopefully to help you guys out. Enjoy your lunch, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jacoby. I would also like to recognize our other sponsors who have really been diligent, faithful, ongoing supporters of the Fair and Affordable Housing Summit. We would like to thank and acknowledge the City of Charlotte Community Relations Committee. City of Charlotte, thank you. The City of Winston-Salem Community and Business Development Department, CBD, thank you. The Fayetteville-Cumberland County Human Relations Department. The Forsyth County Housing and Community Development Department. The Housing Authority of Winston-Salem. The Center for Homeownership. La Valley Properties. Experiment and Self-Reliance. Elliott, Morgan, and Parsonage, LLC. Financial Pathways of the Piedmont. The National Association of Human Rights Workers. The North Carolina Housing Foundation. And the Winston-Salem Mortgage Lenders Association. Thank you, each and every one. Also, I mentioned earlier that we have a New Horizons Fair Housing Committee that plans this event each and every year. We've had several of the committee members who've been on the committee for many, many, many years. And so I would like to ask the representatives and committee members of the New Horizons Fair Housing Committee to please stand. They represent different institutions, agencies, and departments across the city. Would you please stand and be recognized? Also, I would like to thank our Assistant City Manager, Mr. Jorwick Page, who joins us each and every year at this summit. So, Mr. Page, would you please stand so we can thank you? And, of course, my staff. We have Jamie Waldeck, John Floyd, and Adolfo Briceño, who are present today. Would you all please stand to be recognized? We also have people here from across the state. I know that some of you may not be aware of that. We have several people here ranging from the city of Goldsboro. We have the city of Rocky Mount represented, city of Charlotte, city of Durham. We have Orange County represented. And so I really want to say a special thanks to those departments and cities and counties who are here with us today. Thank you for traveling to join us today. Thank you. And this is really special this year because it marks the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, from which many of our civil rights laws have derived. The purpose of the summit is always to bring together housing industry professionals in the areas of banking, lending, financing, selling, and leasing fair and affordable housing to the public. Now, our summit is something that is special to us here locally because it's very rare that housing professionals get an opportunity to come together to share different industry trends and updates. And so, as I mentioned earlier, some of us actually overlap in that we end up serving some of the same people, some of the same customers and clients. And so we have a myriad of programs that exist not only here in Winston-Salem, but across the state that could really benefit all of us. So we really need to take advantage of learning and sharing what we hear and what we experience today. It is my sincere hope that everyone will take advantage of the expertise we have represented on our panel and really engage them, ask questions of them when we have our Q&A session. They're here to speak with you and to share their expertise and knowledge in their respective areas, so please do take advantage of that. Also, I want to give a special thanks to Mr. Dan Cornelis. He is the director of the Forsyth County Housing and Community Development Department. He is to my left, sitting down, and he is going to be taking over from this point forward. Dan has been a supporter of not only our department, but the human relations plight, especially fair housing and affordable housing, for a number of years. I think Dan said that he's been in this profession now for over 30 years. And so we really have an expert in his own right. And so we're very delighted and excited to have Dan with us to moderate and facilitate today's expert panel discussion. We will be on a tight time frame, but again, please understand we will allow for questions and answers. So take advantage of the pens and the paper that you have on every table. Jot down your thoughts and questions, because we will have a wireless mic going around so that you'll be able to pose your questions. Also, Human Relations Commissioners who were present, I don't know, I did not mean to leave you until the end here, but that certainly doesn't mean you're the least of all. So I want to have you all to stand up, because we would not be able to do what we do without your advice, support, and guidance. So our Human Relations Commissioners, please stand to be recognized. Thank you, Commissioners. And without further ado, here's Dan Cornelis.
Thank you, Wanda. Thanks for the fine introduction. The good thing about it is that they always let the old guy be the moderator. So I want to welcome you to the ninth showing of the Academy Awards of Affordable Housing. I wish we had an award for everybody, because everybody deserves an award here that works in housing. It's a labor of love. I brag about our city and our county and our partnerships that have taken place over the years. I go visit other places, and the city hates the county hates the city, the nonprofits hate each other, and nobody wants to apply for anything because they're upset because somebody else might apply for it. So one of the things that I've been very fortunate enough, I feel like that I'm here with my closest 100 friends. So Winston-Salem in Forsyth County is a fine place to live, work, and play, and it's because of the folks out there that are out there are working in this field. I kind of feel like a game show host in that I got the best job because I get to ask the questions. I don't have to answer them. So our panelists here today are going to be able to answer a lot of your questions. They're going to give a presentation. And what we'd like to do, I believe, I never did find this out, but I think this is what I'm going to do, is we're going to hold off questions till the very end. And then as you go along, if you have somebody that you want to ask a question, if you want to write that down, and we'll address it at the end. So what I'd like to do is first introduce, and I'm going to introduce each of our speakers as they come up. Our first speaker is going to be Sherry Lawson Clark, and she is a doctor of anthropology. I almost had a hard time saying anthropology at Wake Forest University, and she's going to come up and talk about the demographics of housing. I told her I hope she's just not talking about how we're getting older and we're going to need less house, but she's going to talk a lot about the demographics and what these demographics mean for us and moving forward as housing providers, not just for affordable housing, but for all housing. So you have a bio there. I'm not going to go in great detail, but she does focus on this area, and we're so proud and so glad to have you here today. Thank you. Okay, have a big hand for Dr. Clark.
Well, thank you. First, I want to thank everyone here because there are so many sponsors. I think that all of you are sponsors of this event, and so I do want to thank you for the invitation. I feel very humbled and grateful for the opportunity. I want to speak to you rather quickly for the next 5 to 7 minutes, I'm told I have, around the issue of fair and affordable housing. And I entitled this piece, Home is Where the Wealth Is, Moving Toward More Equity in Home Ownership. And I want to start out by asking you to consider the power of ideology. And what do I mean by that? What is the American dream, right? For many of us, the American dream consists of owning a home, right? And research will show that home ownership remains a firm part of the American dream. Since 1960, the home ownership rate has remained anywhere from 61 to 65%. As of 2012, 65% of U.S. households owned their own homes. The primary residence represented 62% of the median homeowner's total assets. A greater share of households owned a primary residence than held a retirement account. 67% home ownership to 50% of those homeowners with retirement accounts, and stocks and bonds, 16%. So I'm throwing these numbers at you because I want you to get a picture of where home ownership resides in the American psyche, how we think about home ownership. However, due to those disparities that exist in housing and home ownership, the American dream has different implications for different groups. So I want to start out by talking about the housing burst in 2005. Home ownership rates have fallen more steeply for blacks and native-born Latinos than for the rest of the population. As of 2008, 74.9% of whites owned their homes, compared to 59% of Asians, 48.9% of Hispanics, and just 47.5% of blacks. That is, the black home ownership rate lags behind whites 63%. So looking at what does this all mean? What does this have to do with where we are today in talking about fair housing? I would like to talk about depreciation, because one of the issues with home ownership is what homes are worth. So between 2005 and 2009, African Americans have seen their net worth plummet. African Americans lost 53% of their household wealth. This compares to 16% drop for white households. The bulk of the decline in net worth attributed to the loss of home equity. Right? So from 2009 to 2012, African Americans lost $194 billion in home equity, bringing the gap between white and black wealth to a staggering 20-to-1 ratio. Okay, so looking at where are African Americans buying their homes? How much are those homes valued? Brings up the question of residential segregation. So there are multiple factors that shape housing disparities, and I'm going to go over a few really quickly. One is unemployment, underemployment, household income gaps, increasing wealth gaps, poverty rate is no longer decreasing. Black children are more likely to live in areas of concentrated poverty. More school segregation today than in 1980. Actually, we're at the levels of the 60s, where we have 76.6% of school segregation. The marriage gap has widened. 52% of African Americans live in single-parent households, compared to 17% of white households. Blacks are more likely to be uninsured. We'll see what the ACA has to say about that. The incarceration rate of black men is more than 6 times higher than that of white men, slightly larger than the gap in 1960. So all of these things come into factor when we think about home ownership and the equity that's built inside of it. When we look at black America, we're always thinking about an employment situation that would be labeled severely recessional if it characterized the entire labor force. So we look at African American from 1963 to 2012, the annual black unemployment rate averaged 11.6%, right? And so during our recession, this last recession, we had 6.7% overall when we think about unemployment. I can talk about the wealth gap, continuing on with incarceration rates. You have poor neighborhoods that perpetuate inequality. Poor black neighborhoods have environmental hazards that impedes their health. You have exposure to lead, right, which impedes learning, lowers earnings, and heightens crime rates. While rates of lead exposure have been declining for all races, African American children continue to have the highest exposure rate. We can talk about the dissimilarity index here in Winston-Salem. The dissimilarity index, that is residential segregation, is 63% for blacks. right? And so any rate above what most consider 30% is considered a highly residential, residentially segregated neighborhood. Where are we investing our monies has also plays a role in what we think about is as far as our wealth gap is concerned. So key findings of the Black Investors Survey, for example, reveal habits and perceptions which hinder wealth building. More blacks consider real estate the best investment overall. That's why we're here, thinking about that, right? Additionally, a huge percentage, 71% blacks and 61% whites, choose home improvements over stocks as the better investment. Only 30% of blacks said real estate was the best investment overall. However, this year compared to 41% who picked stocks and or mutual funds. So when I think about other forms of investment for blacks, I'm going to wrap up here, that African Americans save and invest less than whites, as well as their home ownerships, the value of their homes are much less based on residential segregation in their neighborhoods in which their houses are located. And so what I argue here for this particular session is that the Civil Rights of 1968, which is the Fair Housing Law, right, compels us to provide equal housing opportunities for all. So implicit in the American dream, I want to argue, is the goal that our homes will provide not only shelter, but also a source of wealth on which we all can retire. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. The next person I'd like to introduce is Rob Ruzak, who's with the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency Mortgage Lending Group. I've known Rob for some years, and we had a chance some years ago to sit down in a restaurant on a Saturday afternoon and talk about mortgage lending. And in that short hour, I learned a whole lot about mortgage lending that I didn't know, and some of it I probably didn't want to know. But he's very, very good at working with folks. And to be honest with you, the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency is the greatest asset we have in North Carolina as far as providing homeownership opportunities. I know our organization has worked with them for many, many years, and without them, we would not have been able to help the folks that we've been able to help over the years. He's going to come talk to us today about some of their new mortgage products that seem to have changed to adapt to the times that we're in, and so I think you'd be very interested in hearing what he has to say about their mortgage products. With that, I'd like to introduce Rob Ruzak.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, everyone, for letting me be here. So I'll be brief. I was going to talk about our programs, but I did want to mention some statistics because I think that's important. The agency has been, the mission of the agency has been to help low to moderate income individuals since 1974. And I manage the homeownership group at the agency, so I'm focused on home purchases. And this, you may or may not know this, but since we have about $1.9 billion of loans that we've done in that period of time, 31% of all the loans we do are to minorities, and 64% of the loans that we do are to single females. And that statistic's held that way for years. And I did want to mention we also do land trust loans, but we also finance about 90% of all the Habitat homes in the state. You may or may not know that. So I wanted to mention it. And also, Winston-Salem is our third largest market in the entire state. So we appreciate that, particularly Fairway and some other lenders that are here in BB&T who've been big supporters of our program. And without them, we couldn't do it. And so I really appreciate that. And you all may also know that we have our foreclosure prevention program. And that has been huge. It's helped now 16,000 people in the state. And the foreclosure prevention program started about 3 years ago, and that's been huge to help keep people in their homes and retain their homes. So we think that's been important. But I think, Dan, you all asked me to talk a little bit about what programs we offer. In the last year, our program has changed significantly. For the last 40 years, our program has always been financed through tax-exempt bonds, and it's always been a first-time home buyer program. It's always been the low to moderate income, and that part hasn't changed. In the last year, we switched our financing model slightly. We no longer use tax-exempt bonds to finance our mortgages. We now use a mortgage-backed security model, which is traditional in the banking industry. So that's allowed us to do several things, one of which you no longer have to be a first-time home buyer. We've kept our income limits low to moderate income to support housing markets from Charlotte and to Raleigh and east and west, of course. And the big change is now also that with our programs we offer FHA, VA, USDA, conventional, and it's our lenders and our bankers that are the ones that originate the loans. They bring the borrowers to us and we provide the financing for them so they can support that market. One of the big things that housing agencies traditionally bring to lenders is down payment assistance. And with our programs for years we've offered $8,000 in down payment assistance, but we've since switched that up to where now it's 3% of the loan amount if you're doing an FHA or USDA loan. We also offer conventional loans where it's 2% of the loan amount. And now one big change is that down payment assistance is slowly forgiven over time. But we also have a group within our agency that provides what's called a community partners loan pool. And with that program, it's for people that are at 80% of the area median income. And that program offers 15% of the sales price is a 0% down payment assistance program. So that helps a lot of people get into a home who may not otherwise be able to afford a home. And down payment assistance, of course, is a traditional way to help people who are not able to buy a house because I don't know the statistics, but I think down payment assistance or not having a down payment right now is still the leading issue for most buyers to get into a house, not having the funds for closing costs, down payment, etc. So that's an area that we've always been our forte, so to speak, is providing down payment assistance. We still have our mortgage credit certificate program, which is for first-time home buyers. And with that program, the income limits are anywhere from $56,000 for a 1 to 2 person household all the way up to $85,000 if you're a 3-person household in the larger markets. But what it does is it offers that home buyer a tax credit up to $2,000 a year every single year they live in their house. So that's a huge, because what that does, if you take that $2,000 and divide it by 12, that's $160 a month of potential walking around money, net income, real money that that borrower can use to pay their mortgage, buy gas, buy food, extra income in their pocket. And so I think that I wanted to mention also that our average income of all our borrowers has been trending at $41,000 across the state for the last 15 years. So that shows we help that low to moderate income market, and that's our mission. That's what we believe in, and that's where is our sort of our knitting. So I'm going to end with that, and of course at the end we all can ask some questions. I'm sure Dan will have some questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I think these might be your glasses too, so you might need them.
Yeah. See that? I didn't have them on, so I couldn't find them.
Our next speaker is from legal aid, and I can't say enough about legal aid, especially in this last period of recession. I don't know how many folks out there have referred client after client to legal aid to solve problems that the clients couldn't solve themselves and really needed someone to be their advocate in court. And we're thankful to have legal aid in North Carolina. We're really glad to have Takesha Red as the managing supervisor in our local Winston-Salem office. She's going to come talk about fair housing and some of the discrimination complaints that have arisen over the years. So give a warm welcome to Takesha Red.
Good afternoon. I have been asked to give you all some brief statistics about what we do at Legal Aid as it relates to fair housing, and since we are a statewide agency, some of the things that we see across the state of North Carolina. Now, before I go ahead, I want to kind of mention our office is located in Winston, and we have a 9-county service area. But within the organization of legal aid, we have a fair housing project that is a statewide project. I think it's maybe 3 staff attorneys. That's where our tester is located in the Raleigh office, and then they have a support staff person. And they handle cases from all over the state as well. So any of the assistance and knowledge that I have, I got from those great people in Raleigh, and since they're not here today, I want to make sure that I give them their kudos. So one of the questions that was posed to me to present to you all today was, what are the most common types of housing discrimination complaints that we receive? So this is going to be statewide and then some Forsyth County specific. The majority of them that we see are related to disability. And they may come in the form of a denied reasonable modification request or a denied reasonable accommodation request, or it may come to us in the form of an eviction based on, say, non-payment of rent because the person consistently pays their rent late. Well, if they receive Social Security disability and they don't get their check until the 15th, but the rent is due on the 1st, what our office would do in that instance was we would submit a reasonable accommodation request asking the landlord to move the due date of the rent to the 15th. That then serves the client because they're able to pay the rent. It reduces the stress level because they're not trying to not spend their money so they could use the previous month's check to pay the next month's rent. Everybody's happy, nobody gets evicted. We also have seen cases involving sexual harassment. Thankfully, we've not seen any of those lately around this area, but across the state, our program in Raleigh has handled a few cases involving sexual harassment. Race still continues to be one of the most common complaints that we receive, as well as familial status. The nationwide data shows that disability, race, and familial status are the top 3 fair housing complaints that are handled. We handle cases, as I said, they may come to us in a defensive capacity, such as the person who's getting a lease termination notice or an eviction action because their rent is late. Or it may be an affirmative situation where if a person has mobility issues and they've asked to have handrails installed or a doorway widened or a ramp built and that request was denied, we would get involved and affirmatively resolve the issue before it ended up in a defensive capacity. One of the other questions asked to me today was to discuss disparate impact and how it pertains to housing professionals. That's a really loaded question, and I'm pretty sure you all don't want to hear me pontificate about that. So I will just give you a brief example. A disparate impact is when you have a facially neutral, meaning on its face, it's not discriminatory policy, rule, or regulation, that tends to have a disproportionate impact on a certain group or a protected class. So say, for example, if you couldn't not rent to a black person or a particular religion or someone with a disability or handicap or because they have kids or not have kids, but you could say, I don't want to rent to felons. Now, as this nice lady here, Dr. Carter, mentioned, if 60% of African American males have been convicted and you say, well, I don't want to rent to black men, but I can't really say that, so I'll just say I won't rent to convicts. If that facially neutral policy disproportionately affects a segment of the population, you're setting yourself up for a fair housing violation. So my advice to you is please don't do that. Because that's the type of thing, if we were to get, which would lead into my next topic, if we were to get a hint that that was what was going on, we may then contact our testing department and have some testers come out. And what that looks like is we would have people to come out, they would inquire about maybe, can I rent this apartment, or what is the price, or, do you have any apartments available? And, of course, one person would fit one category, the other person would fit the other category, and then they would report their findings to us, and then depending on what those findings were, the next step, you may be getting a phone call, or you may be getting something a little bit worse than a phone call. But so, yeah, we have testing programs that go on, and just about testing in general, the specific purpose is to determine if differences exist due to a customer's protected status, such as race, color, natural origin, religion, sex, disability, or familial status. And the tests are designed based on the type of the complaint. So depending on what we hear on the other end of the phone, that particular situation is then distilled down and put into a test where people go out and then they report their data to us. So, testing could be complaint-based, meaning someone called us and said, well, we think they're refusing to rent to us because we have kids, because we had our friends who don't have children go and apply for the same apartment, and their application was approved. So that would be an example of a complaint-based. Then you have systemic, which is the collecting of information about general market practices, such as I said, do you have a policy about not renting to felons? Do you have a policy about not renting to people who only have one person in the household? And then the next type of testing would be market-based, where you would look at the aggregate of rental, lending, sales, insurance, et cetera. And design and construction is the last category. So I hope that gave you all just kind of a general overview of the fair housing work that we do at Legal Aid. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them for you during the Q&A portion. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ruth Hudspeth, and she's the mortgage broker for Fairway Independent Mortgage. I've known Ruth for a long time, and she's one of the go-to persons when you have a tough mortgage or you have a question that you don't know the answer to. She seems to always know the answer or know how to get it. So she has been, we were kind of swapping war stories before the meeting about how difficult some situations can be when dealing with the government. So we have her today talking about the qualified lending standards, and it's very interesting when you bring those up. There's some people say they're the greatest thing in the world, and then there's others they say it's going to stymie lending. So Ruth is here to tell us the truth about the whole situation.
Well, first of all, I'm not an expert. The original Dodd-Frank was the proposal over 3,000 pages. The next set we've got coming is 1,099 pages. I'm not sure there is an expert. I'm not sure there can be an expert when you're talking about that. If you have a chance, you should go to the CFPB website and look at the list of proposed regulations. This is what I pulled. You can see this goes back from 2014. This is just through 2012. 2 pages of proposed regulations, changes in regulations, and it seems overwhelming. The bottom line with Dodd-Frank came down to ATR, which that acronym stands for ability to repay. Congress felt like too many people were given mortgages that they couldn't repay. So they said, don't make loans. People don't have the ability to repay. I've been doing this over half my life now, and since 1988, that's been the standard. Don't loan people money they can't pay you back. So I don't think it's earth-shattering what has happened. I think there's just some reminders and clarity in what we do and how we should do it. At the end of the day, it reminds me of a good friend of mine who's a lender, and on the back of his business card, it says, do the right thing. Do the right thing. And so what QM is qualified mortgage. Dodd-Frank said, okay, you've got to prove the ability to repay. They took 8 criteria lenders have to analyze, which are basically current or reasonably expected income and assets, current employment status, monthly payment on covered transactions, monthly payment on simultaneous loans, monthly payments for mortgage-related obligations, which means you're like your taxes and insurance and homeowners dues, current debt obligations, alimony, child support, and monthly debt-to-income ratios, or residual income, which is another way to look at a household and see if they can afford a payment. And it does seem like a lot, and it can be frustrating. But if you have dealt with as many folks as I have over the last few years that have lost their home, it sort of makes sense that we step back and take a look at loaning somebody money they can't pay back doesn't help anyone. And it's heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking to see what these families go through. So QM is under the umbrella of ATR. If you originate a qualified mortgage, the assumption is it's going to then fit under Dodd-Frank and the ability to repay. What the differences are with QM, they've added some overlays, and that's a new thing we've had in lending, overlays. It's interesting to talk about. One way to comply with ATR is to originate QM loans. Because if they're not QM loans, you're as a creditor, your liability is huge, not only from the consumer but from the agencies. Okay, seems to me if you're loaning money people can't pay back, there's all kinds of repercussions, though, from a business perspective. Who wants to go there? But we did, and we did it as we the people. People borrowed the money, people loaned the money, people sold the loans on the secondary market. The regulators maybe didn't have as sharp as eye as they should have had, but at the end of the day, isn't that we the people? So every time something as drastic as what happened with the housing market happens, you're going to see the pendulum swing too far to the right. And it will take a good deal of time to come back to the middle. But isn't that, I mean, doesn't that make sense at some level? It does to me. So one way to the other thing about QM loans is no negative AM, so you can't have a loan with negative amortization. If you have a negative AM loan, it won't fit into QM. No interest-only loans, no term that doesn't exceed 30 years, and there are points and fees limitations. It's pretty reasonable to me. I don't know about you guys, but it doesn't seem to be too bad. One of the questions they wanted me to answer is, what's the effect on lending? Well, you know, debt ratio can't exceed 43%. I guess it depends on your perspective. I got in the business in '88. The old school ratios, Robert knows, 28-36. If you didn't fit in the 28-36, you weren't getting a loan. 29-41 for FHA loans. 43% seems fairly generous to me. And underwriters are definitely going to scrutinize income a lot more closely than they have in the past. Where you have 9 months of overtime, you might have been able to convince an underwriter in the past, come on, man, obviously they're getting the overtime. Those probably not going to happen anymore. So there's going to be tighter regulations and guidelines and restrictions when you're looking at income. And, you know, one of the implications that's not such a good thing is the cost of compliance. The cost to comply when they make it, you know, if you look at a copy paper, stack of copy paper, there's 500 pages in it. So you want to take that, stack it up, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and then some, and then add another 1,000 to that. How many stacks of copy paper is that? And part of the problem is in my opinion, because again, I'm not an expert, a lot of this is opinion, a lot of the rules are written by people that don't do the job. So they don't have a great understanding of what it takes. And they also make it fuzzy. They use words like reasonable. You know what I'm saying? Well, what's reasonable to one guy is not going to be reasonable to the next guy. And so the cost of compliance, legal costs for creditors, it's huge. When I look at how much just our legal department has grown, and the consumer typically at the end of the day is going to be the one bearing those costs, right? The cost of getting a loan has gone up. And in my mind, when I read the regulations, don't give somebody a loan they can't pay back, I'm just not so sure we didn't make it more difficult than what it needed to be. You know, one of the things I learned in Wake MBA was keep it simple, stupid. KISS. You know, there maybe was a way that you didn't have to make everybody so gun shy. But that's a personal opinion. And we're working our way through it. I think they haven't all hit yet. We've got a bunch more regs coming August of 2015. Could have some delayed closings, new HUD, new GFE, new TIL. So we're still working through it. Wish I'd been on the panel to write that stuff. And then they wanted me to talk a little bit about the local market and what we're seeing. I don't know how many of you guys know Michael Clapp. He's a great appraiser in this area, been around for a very long time. He sends out a newsletter, and that's where I get a lot of my statistics from. So I called him up and asked him if I could share his summary. And what he said is the weakening in demand that began in 2007 continued through 2011, but sales volume rebounded strongly in 2012, was up 8.2%, and continued to increase at an even stronger rate, 24% through 2013. He says the 5 newsletters, which he's talking about prior, prices, he said prices may be on the verge of stabilizing. Indeed, for the last 5 newsletters, prices have increased and are up 4.1% over 2012. Unemployment picture appears to be improving, but this is due to the unemployed giving up the search for jobs, which is pretty sad, and leaving the workforce. The number of persons employed has nearly remained the same from December 2012 to December 2013, but due to a shrinking labor force, the unemployment rate has fallen to 6.1%. Even so, the inventory level for existing housing has shown strong improvement. Competitive pricing and excellent condition remain key factors for the successful marketing of residential real estate given current market conditions. So if you want to talk about what's happening locally in Winston-Salem, we're getting kicked this spring. It's really cool to actually feel a spring market again. It's like Back to the Future. So we're moving properties in this area. And thanks to North Carolina Housing, we're helping a lot of people get into a home they can afford and have the ability to repay. Nationally, it's a little different. I think it depends on who you ask and what you read in the media. One place it says it's great, another place you see builders, housing starts down. You have areas in the West Coast that they're pricing people out of affordable housing now. And housing prices are going up considerably. So, in areas like Detroit, where they're giving away houses for $1,000. So it really depends on where you are. But overall, I think we're going this way instead of this way for the first time, in my mind, since '07. I hope that helped.
Now comes your chance to ask this group of experts questions that are on your mind or issues that are in your mind. And I think, how much time do we have to do that, Wanda? 15 minutes? So talk fast. And I think we got a microphone up here if anybody wants to use it. Or is that, so, I don't know who's going to be our van in white, but somebody needs to.
Good afternoon. I'm Willie Rashford from Charlotte, and my question is to Dr. Clark. You talked about home ownership and the value of black home ownership versus white owner home ownership and the disproportionate amounts. In America, housing values are assessed based upon their proximity to white people. If white people live close, home values are up. If white people live far away, then home values are down. So my question to you is, if that is the truth, how do we get home values in black communities to go up if we can't get white folk to understand that it's okay to live with black folk or next door to black folk?
Good question. That's a great question. Thank you very much. And it's one in which I sort of wrestle with in my research all the time, because you're talking about changing racial attitudes, which is a very difficult thing to do, right? So in part of my presentation, what I wanted to emphasize is not to say that African Americans should not be homeowners. Absolutely, I think homeownership is key, and there are a lot of variables that sort of look at the well-being for individuals who are homeowners. What I'm arguing for is that if you're looking at homeownership as a asset building part of your sort of asset building, then I would say to decrease sort of the emphasis on home ownership. Many people, like, I want to build onto my house, or I want to redo my kitchen, I want to remodel, then I would argue take those monies elsewhere and put them into stocks and bonds, mutual funds, et cetera, and so to diversify your investments, because what we do see and what research is showing is that for most African Americans, that their home is their major form of their asset. And what we're seeing is that there is no equity. The equity, when you compare black homeownership to white homeownership, it's just not there. So if you're thinking about, I'm going to retire on my equity, you're not going to. And so you need to think about other forms of investment. We've seen it also in retirement funds, that for many, especially during this recession, that for most African Americans in comparison to whites, took from their retirement funds, right? Because they needed to sort of
of live off of, and so that they borrowed from their retirement, where you don't see that in white households. So I would argue that no, we're not going to necessarily change the racial attitudes of individuals, and you're right, because you have white flight, right? So individuals, there's a tipping point in all communities. When it reaches a certain number, individuals will move out. And we see that not just across race, but we also see it across class, right? And so you're not going to change those attitudes. I would say just to diversify.
Hi, Caressa Vance, Coldwell Banker. It's not my question, but just to add on to that, a lot of times it's not necessarily who you're living with, it's the area and what you can afford. So that's where the big disparity is. Because if you don't have a, $300,000 a year job, you're not going to live in the larger homes. So my question, though, is there has been a lot of remodifications in mortgage for homeowners whose homes have been devalued, but they still have that mortgage of $200,000, but their house is now worth $150,000. And when you go to refinance, you can't get that refinancing assistance. And also in cases where there's investment properties, there's no outlet for that, so you're left with a property that's devalued. You can't, even if you wanted to add to it, there's no need because you're adding money into something that's already devalued. What are they going to do, or is there anything in that 3,000 pages that's going to address those issues?
Not to my knowledge. They've tried, and they've got all the HARP and the HAMP and the HUMP and all that stuff that was going to help people refinance. But at the end of the day, it's it's too risky, right? For a lender to be upside down. That's what got us here. So it's going to be it's that overlay thing I said. There's some agency guidelines that allow you to do some things, but the overlays aren't allowing it to happen because no one wants to take on that risk. Yep. Yeah, I think time is the answer, because we are seeing property values rise again. Some areas considerably, like on the West Coast. And I was just reading an article. A lot of homeowners aren't upside down and just don't know it. Could save themselves from foreclosure if they understood that they're not upside down, because they could actually sell the house now and get out from underneath it. So a lot of it has to do with education, things like this, and Center for Home Ownership and things of that nature. North Carolina Housing's foreclosure prevention. They have a lot of venues and outlets for people if people know about it. And so a lot of it is just getting that information out there to the people that need it.
I've been told if you have a follow-up remark, you need to speak into the microphone because this is being televised live across the nation. So.
Oops. Following through sort of on this thread, I would, not that there's no link, but rather than being close to white folks, I think it's more income-based than it is racially based, although I'm not here to say that we have, equality of income across, across the racial divide, but I think that's more of it. And so the reason we've had such a loss in black equity is a lot of folks that owned their homes were in lower price points in the market. And when everything hit the fan, there were a lot of investors, quote, quote, who had invested in rental housing in these lower priced properties, and they had built a house of cards, and it all fell apart. And when those went into foreclosure, lenders weren't lending to investors anymore. If you were a decent investor, you couldn't get a loan to invest in these properties. So it was cash is king. I worked with a lot of people who had cash, and we got some incredible deals for those people. But it drove down the pricing and the evaluation of those properties. And I think if lenders would come back and be willing to lend to investors again, you would see a raise in valuation to what is a true fair market value. But lenders and appraisals are all driven on what was bought, what was paid, what it was paid for. We are starting to see some of that come back a little bit, but at the lower price points in the market, people can't get a loan to buy those houses because the price points are so distressed. So I think if we had more liquidity at the lower end of the price point scale, it would drive those prices up again, and I think it would improve things. Now, I don't have the answers for that, but I think it's something that people who are concerned about this should be looking for answers to and having the discussion with people that might come up with some answers.
I think that's interesting. One of the things that we have been tracking in at our office is the foreclosures. We know every foreclosure that's happened since 2007, and we've mapped that out. But in doing so, our office has looked at the number of houses that are being purchased for cash, and these foreclosures are being purchased a lot of times by hedge funds. There's about 4 or 5 hedge funds, and our estimate is over 700 units in the last year and a half have been purchased in Forsyth County alone. What amazes me, too, is I look every month, some report comes out, and it says 52% of the homes are being purchased with cash. And to me, that seems very historically high. Ruth, what do you think of that? I mean, is that a high number?
If you got cash, you aren't talking to me.
But, I think that raises a lot of questions. On the good side of it, we must be a hot housing market, right? Because investors wouldn't want to buy these houses, but they're buying them and they're renting them out. So on one hand, that's good, but then in some markets, it drives up the price. You talked about driving up the price is a good thing. As a first-time home buyer, I think the price being low is a good thing. I guess everybody has their decision as to what's good and what's bad, but some of the markets are getting overheated. So we think it's an interesting phenomenon. We don't understand exactly what it means in the long run, but we think it's very interesting that that's happening here in Forsyth County. Yes.
Yes, I'd like to do a little pushback to the gentleman and his comments he made a minute ago. The reason black folk don't have equity is that we never had equity, not in this country. If you look at the economic dynamic in America, there's a professor at Duke University, an African-American professor who teaches a race relations class, and she uses Monopoly to teach her kids about race. And she has a class, say, of 50 students, half black and half white, and the first 3 days of the class, only the black students in the class can play Monopoly. And for those of you who are familiar with Monopoly, you play, you go around the board, you get to buy up houses, hotels, you get to buy up properties, you get to buy up the railroads and the utilities. After the third day, they passed a law that said that this is not fair, we should allow the white kids to play. And so the white kids get on the board, and everything has already been taken and bought up, and as they go around the board, financially and economically, they're getting their butts kicked. And their response is, I'd rather hit that damn thing that says, go right to jail, than to have to go around the board. And the reason for the equity gap has to do with the fact that in the first 236-year history of this country, black folk were not allowed to play Monopoly. And by the time we got in the game, we were so far behind that we will always have this dynamic or this disproportionality. The other thing is that white people have to pay a price for racism. And one of the prices that white people pay for racism is that whites would prefer to pay $500,000 for a $150,000 house so that they can live in the right neighborhood. And developers are making a killing off of you. Thank you.
I just would like to know what the experts think about this idea, because I like to be solution driven, but with a reality check, which is we have to take the reality that this gentleman just gave us, and I think then say, what do we do with this reality? Now, from my point of view, I think that we need to have more education and discussions within the black community, because we'll have to be our own solution. Nobody's going to come and solve these issues. That's a fact. So we need to have more. If you want to help us, we have to foster more discussion about the reality of our existence so that we can come up with our solutions. Because sometimes if you try to play by the rules that are already rigged, the Monopoly game that has already been paid, you're 200 and some years behind on the board, you have to throw out the rules. You got to go back and say, what is it that we can do in our own communities to change our reality? Because we continue to go around and around in this circle without acknowledging the reality of our existence, playing by the rules that have been set in a system that maintain the privilege that others have gained. We can never, if you're playing the game of catch up, you're never going to catch up. So you have to either change those rules, make another kind of decision about what it is you want to do, what is important, what is wealth to you. You got to we have to start defining what is important to us. Because if we continue on this treadmill of thinking that the only thing that's important are the rules that exist and the standards that already have been set, we will always be in this position, and that's not a winning position for me. So I think that as a solution, we need to foster education and real discussion within the black community so that we can come to grips with that reality and then come up with some solutions.
Thank you.
Thank you. My question is for Ruth. I know that we're experiencing this, but I just want to get your take on the impact of student loans on individuals and families' ability to actually get a mortgage.
Most loan types require you to count. I'm pretty loud. Most types of loans require you to count student loans now. I think we're getting a new mortgagee later from HUD that's going to actually make us start counting the student loans even if they're deferred. I guess the way I feel about it is it gets back to ability to repay. Can you afford the house payment when those student loans, it's okay, great to be able to make the house payment for the first 12 months, but when those student loans hit, are you going to be able to make the house payment and the student loan payments? And once again, it gets back to the worst thing you can do is put somebody in a home that they can't afford to pay back and they're going to lose. As much as it sucks to tell somebody, no, you don't qualify for that loan now, it's way, way better to do it that way than have those student loans hit and them not be able to, A, pay back their student loans, B, make their house payment, ruin their credit for a decade. So I don't have a real problem with some portion of the student loans being counted, even if they're in deferment. Any other lender here that wants to give an opinion on that? Ann, what do you feel about that?
Microphone needs to come back this way.
You guys consider student loans, even if they're not in repayment, right?
Now we do.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. We have to.
That was it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we've heard, but we don't know exactly. By June, I think.
Ask that question again, if you will, please.
The question was, when when do we expect HUD to start counting the repayment of student loans?
The
And
last
so-
I heard, the mortgagee letter was going to be out by June. They were expecting it in spring, but I think there's some pushback coming on it. So I think it may be June.
And it will likely be for case numbers going forward
Right,
from that
that's-
date when
yeah,
the letter
yeah,
goes
they
out.
don't go backwards. They
Okay.
go forwards with it. Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
don't you think it makes sense?
I do. I think that a lot of people, I talk to a lot of people who seem to think that they never have to repay those student loans. I've had people in $24,000 a year jobs, and they've got, 20 years of education and $200,000 in student loans, and this is the job that they have as a result of this $200,000 in student loans, and they just act like they're never going to have to pay those back. And I think some reality needs to be established when they're taking out those loans.
Slippery slope.
Yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon. I just want to kind of piggyback on what Ruth was just speaking about as well, and also kind of talk about the affordable housing as a whole. And I'm Jacoby with BB&T, and it's a hard job being in this role, but it's a special job. Okay, it's a special job. When you're working with a client, a first-time home buyer, and they're in your office and you're sitting across from them. And they kind of, you hear their story, and they're not just your client. They come kind of like your family. And that's just the first-time home buyer. Like, I work with other types of clients as well, but the first-time home buyer is extra special. And, you go to the closing, you might see some crying, you crying together, y'all dancing, and, they're just so happy taking pictures. And they sit there and tell you, I'm the first person in my family to own a home. And it's like, I've been hearing the conversations, we're talking about race and things of that nature. And, I see it from both sides, being a young African-American male. But it's special because, they get a chance to leave a legacy. They're having something that they can have of their own. And so I think it's very important, being in this industry, that, the programs that we have working with the Center for Home Ownership, I believe the first piece, we got to start at the foundation, because without a foundation, even with the home, a metaphor, the home is not gonna last. I think education is the biggest piece. Credit, and home ownership is a dream. It's like you have dreams. You wake up, that's all it is. Now you got to do something about it. Home ownership is definitely a dream that clients have, but they don't know what direction to start at to achieve that dream. So education is the first piece where we need to start at. The credit piece, the financial piece. The doctor kind of talked about assets. A lot of first-time home buyers are asset poor. Tell you the truth, no reserves, but we make it happen. So, being a homeowner, what happens when that car breaks down? Things of that nature that clients don't really kind of have that fortitude to kind of look ahead. And their education is piece. So if we can start right there at the ground level, work with clients. Okay, the IDA program here is excellent. I don't know, they prepared. It's a 12-month program. Clients go through there. They're forced to save. I have been a partner of it. We come in. They have financial advisors come in, speak with them, lenders, realtors. D. Oliver's one of the realtors that speak to them. Just give them the overall process. So when they're finished with that, they have some assets to save. You got to put down earnest money. Clients just don't understand. Clients in my office, they don't understand. You got to have some. You're gonna have to pay for an appraisal. You're gonna have to earnest money, home inspections, and you need to have some cash ready to go. So I believe that education piece is where we need to start at.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christy Dubose, and I work for the Winston-Salem Housing Authority. He just told my whole story that I was going to tell, so I feel kind of bad now. But in 2002, I was in college, and I started working at the Housing Authority, and I also started the IDA program, all in that 1 year. While I was in IDA, I said, shoot, I can't finish college, start and keep up with this new job, and do home ownership. So I was constantly battling back and forth. But I met Ruth, I met Dan, and I met Bianca Green. And the three people encouraged me, you can do this. Well, when I went to Ruth, I said, Ruth, I have a car, but the car is in my mom's name. And Karen used to always get on me because she said, why is that car always breaking down and it's brand new? Anyway, to make a long story short, my car was breaking down. It was brand new. It was covered under a warranty. I was trying to get back and forth to school, trying to figure out how I was going to take care of my daughter and save money to buy this house. So I sat down one day. I went through the IDA class. They gave me good news about making a budget. They gave me good news about if your car breaks down. They gave me good news that I could get an IDA loan assistance. So when I went to Ruth, I said, Ruth, car's not in my name. I do have student loans. Well, she said the good thing, they're not going to count them. Well, they were not counting them against your debt. She told me to sit down, think about it. If you have a car, you got a car payment. It's not in my name, so that worked to my advantage. Although that worked to my advantage, those bills still existed. That car payment, those student loans. I graduated from school. I still had my job, but I still had that car payment and those student loans, and I still had a mortgage that I just began to pay. I went from public housing, or low-income housing, not quite public housing, to a mortgage. That was the scariest thing in the world I could have ever done. My rent increased from a rent to a mortgage to about $300 in difference. But I saved through IDA, like you said. I followed my budget plan, and I did that until I got remarried and bought another house. And I was able to do that all because I did what IDA said and what Dan told me. If your house has a problem, call me and we can refer you to somebody that can fix it. And the first time I moved in my house, the water leaked the first week we were there, and I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. I had damage in the kitchen, damage under the sink, and I thought, I just moved here and the inspector inspected this place and it's leaking. So I called Dan and he said, don't panic. I got somebody for you. I got somebody for you, but student loans, don't think because they're deferred. They're not coming. They're sitting out there. And that car payment that mama has in her name for you, sitting out there. That water's going to leak in the house. And that car's going to break down. And that baby's going to get sick. So I had to think about all these things. But this was the best thing that could have ever happened to me in homeownership. It's the educational classes. Because without those classes, and then I went to Miss Phyllis. She was my last stop before I went to go to Ruth to do my mortgage. She said, I bought a house, and you wouldn't believe what happened to it. I remember your story. When she told us her story, I broke down in tears. I said, Lord, if I go buy a new house and all this stuff happens to me, and they changed my closing date on me 3 times, she said that happened to her. I said, that ain't going to happen to me. It happened. They changed my closing date 3 times. And I said, they just don't want me to buy no house. I'm just going to quit. So that was my feeling. But Ruth called me one day. She said, oh, they got your paperwork ready? Are you ready? And I thought, are this serious? And I ran and asked Karen again, Karen, can I get off? She's like, for what now? And I said, today is my closing day. She said, go buy your house and be happy with it. So that was my story. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you for your story. We'll have to pay you a little bit of a fee there after it's all done. We'll give you an extra piece of cake.
I just want to speak on behalf of, I'm one of the faces of IDA. I'm also a grateful graduate of that program. I'm a homeowner, a single mother, and now I sit on the opposite side of that desk as an IDA success coach, and it's very heartening. It's very disheartening when we are scrambling hard to try to start a new class and trying to find suitable applicants because of student loans. You know, the last thing we want to do is set you up. What's the right words? For failure. You know, we can't accept you and you got $100,000 worth of student loans and you're making $22,000. You didn't graduate, and you're still not you're not even in school. So we're faced a lot. And I want to piggyback on what Jacoby said. Going to the closings and seeing the tears and participating with the clients all through the process, but knowing that just getting them to that point, it's a lot of work. We get quite a few African Americans that come that want to be a homeowner, and that's the first thing I applaud them for and try to encourage them. You know, sometimes that dream is not going to manifest right now. We have to direct them back to the Center for Home Ownership because they have so much heavy debt that we cannot successfully pass them through in the 2 years that's allotted for the program. I have now on my desk, I have 7 applicants that's ready to go to the next phase. They'll be coming to Forsyth County Housing to hopefully be a homeowner. And all of them have so many different phases, and you know, I'm hoping that they will be successful in home ownership. And student loan is really, that's one of the biggest things that we face with our applicants now. So I'll be at a loss sometime with how to, do I accept them, do we accept them or cancel? I'm gonna pass this on now.
It's the next bubble, in my opinion, student loan bubble.
Thank you all so much. I'm Sandra Braswell. I'm a mortgage manager with BB&T. Thank you all for having the Fair and Affordable Housing Forum today. I am a native of Winston-Salem, and so it is true to heart that I was glad to come today. I have worked in the industry for over 26 years, and I have always concentrated on fair and affordable housing. I want to say that due to the foreclosure crisis that we went through, we saw many things that we did not expect. A lot had to do with student loans that people had to pay 3 and 5 years after being in the mortgage process. A lot had to do with investors who were pushing high interest rates and adjustable interest rates. So what we did due to government regulations in lending and in the industry is that we pushed home buying. We wanted everybody to buy a house, so we really pushed home buying. But after reflecting after the foreclosure crisis, now we're trying to stop at the beginning and educate homeowners. We want people to be able to buy their houses and sustain home ownership. We learned from the errors that we made in pushing home buyers. But we want to have home owners, and we want people not to have to experience what they experienced before in buying a house and losing a house. And with that being said, we're going to hit another curve in the next 3 to 5 years where the people who lost a house are going to try to buy houses again. That wave is coming. So with that being said, I want us to also know that there have been many government regulations. Maybe we overcompensated for the errors that we made, but I think we're going to see a wave again where we'll have good credit, bad credit, no credit, bankruptcy, buy a house. You know, that's almost what it boiled down to. And so that's what we are trying to prevent. But as lenders, no matter what the racial barriers that we have, there have not always been programs like North Carolina Housing and the down payment programs. So now we have programs in place that no matter what the racial background is of anyone, we want to make sure that we look to the future and make sure that we concentrate on making sure there are programs available for the home buyers. So I wanted to just take a minute to let you all know where we've been and the directions that we're trying to go in to make sure that we can help people stay in their houses once they get in their houses. But also thank you all for the partnerships that we have in the room today, because we have not always had those.
Thank you.
Government loans back in 1988 when I got in the business was still 41%. It's gross income. It's not net. And that total debt ratio includes car payments, student loan payments, credit card payments. It's not just the house payment. The house payment is limited to about a third, 31%, okay? So that back end ratio includes the debt. So that leaves you over 50% of your income for everything else. So it makes sense to me. Very few foreclosures happened because most of the time it was because deflating values and job loss, not because they couldn't make the loan when they got the loan, at least in my opinion.
Thank you, Ruth. thank you, everyone. I mean, we've had some really excellent questions and some really excellent answers from our panel of experts. Let's give them a hand, please. Also, how about our facilitator? We can't beat him, right? We can't beat him. And so now it's a matter of where do we go from here? And I think that we really do have a takeaway. I think everyone in here should have a nugget that they can take back to wherever it is that you work. I don't care if you're a banker, lender, if you work for government, nonprofits, whatever. You should have something that you can take back. You should have something, too, that you didn't know before you walked in these doors. You should have learned something today. So please don't just let the knowledge stop here and stop today. Take it back. Share it. Share it with your coworkers and colleagues. Share it with your clients and customers. And let's make sure that we keep everything moving forward as we try to affirmatively further not only fair housing, but affordable housing as well. So at this time, I would like to give a very small token of appreciation to each of our panelists. Dr. Lawson Clark, I give this to you, please. Ruth. Thank you, Ruth. Takesha. Rob. And Dan. Yes, we have one for you, too. And again, it's just a small token of our appreciation from the Human Relations Commission, Department, and the New Horizons Fair Housing Committee. We really appreciate your time today. We appreciate the time that you took to exercise patience and diligence with your answers and for ad-libbing along the way, too, because we just gave them guided questions. But believe me, they took those questions to a whole other level. So we really want to thank you for doing that. Thank you so much. And Dan, did you have any comments that you'd like to offer?
I would like to say this. I want you to know that what you do changes people's lives. Sometimes we think about it. We have rough days where we're reading subsection 3 of paragraph 2, rule number 48, but we forget about what we're actually doing. And the thing is, we're changing families' lives, children's lives, parents' lives, and what you do is very important to this community, and we thank you for that.